Hello and welcome back to Mastering Flat Design. In this lesson, we're going to add some navigation to our content slider. We're going to add a right-facing arrow over here on the right to take us to the next slide. We'll add a left-facing arrow on the left to take us to the previous slide. And then we'll also add a series of 4 small circles at the bottom to represent each slide, so we can click on any one of those to take us to that particular slide. So let's start with our previous and next buttons. We'll get the hard part out of the way first. So we're going to go to the ellipse tool. And before we get any further, let's actually clean up our layers a little bit. We have our navigation bar layer right here, and then everything above it, this rectangle here, these 2 text fields, as well as this group and this group, those are all part of this slider. So let's grab all of these layers above the nav layer and group them together, again holding on to Command Shift Option and clicking on the folder button, or if you're using a PC, Control Shift Alt and clicking on the folder button, and that will group all of these into a folder, and we're going to call this folder Content Slider. And just so that it kind of looks the same as the page itself, I'm going to drag the content slider layer just below the navigation layer. Then inside the content slider group, we're going to create our arrows. So I'm going to click on the group that we have right here that contains the 3 portfolio images, and I'm going to click to create a new layer just above that. On that new layer, we're going to create our shape. So we're going to start with the circle. So I've got the ellipse tool selected. For the fill color, I'm going to eyedropper the same orange background color that we've been using for the home button, as well as a few other items. And then we're going to create a circle. Notice we have no stroke selected here, so I'm just going to click and drag out while holding on to Shift so that it stays a perfect circle. And I'm going to make this 54 pixels by 54 pixels, like so. We'll hit V to switch to the Move tool, and then we can move this where we need it to be. So I'm going to drag it over until it's aligned to the left edge of our content slider. Then, with that ellipse layer still selected, I'm going to hold on to Command or Control if you're using a PC and click over here in the right section of the rectangle layer that serves as the background for our content slider. And the reason I'm clicking over here in the right area is because we don't want to control click in the preview or the thumbnail area, because that will make a selection. We don't want to make a selection. We just want to select both of these layers. So once both of those layers are selected, basically what I'm trying to do here is to center this button vertically over the content slider background. So with both of those layers selected, we'll come up here with the Move tool, and we're going to click to align vertical centers. And you'll notice that moves this item down a little bit. So then with just that ellipse layer selected, we'll click to make sure that that's the only layer selected. I'm going to hold on to Shift and hit the left arrow key once because I want it to hang over the edge a little bit. The next thing I want to do is to put an arrow inside this that's pointing to the left to make it clear that this is a button that will take us to the previous slide. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click here to take us down to the Custom Shape tool. Once that's selected, we're going to select our shape, and the shape we're looking for is this chevron or this arrow shape here. If you don't have that available, you can click on this gear icon and then click on All, and that will load all of the default Photoshop shapes. And again, this is the one we're looking for here. Once we have that selected, we're going to click and drag out, holding onto Shift so that it maintains the right proportions. And we'll drag that out over the shape that we just drew, over that circle. Then I'm going to change the fill color for this new shape to white, like so. And I'll use the Move tool to nudge it into place until it looks like it's centered within that circle. Then I'm going to take both of these items, both of these layers, the shape that we just created and the ellipse layer, and I'm going to put them in a group, and I'm going to call that group Next. Because right now we have this arrow that's pointing to the right, so that's actually the next button. So let's drag this, holding onto Shift as we drag it to the right. And by holding on to Shift, that'll keep us from moving it up and down. So we'll just drag directly to the right until it's aligned to the right edge of the content slider area, and then Shift right arrow to nudge it over 10 pixels. Then I'm going to drag this group that contains that graphic in it. I'm going to drag that down to the new layer icon to make a copy of that group, and we're going to rename this group PREV for previous. Then with that previous group selected, we'll just drag this back to the left till it snaps to the left edge of the content area, and then shift left arrow to nudge it over 10 pixels, and then we need to flip this over. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go inside the previous group here to the shape 1 layer, and with that shape 1 layer selected, we're going to go to the edit menu, transform, flip horizontal, and that'll flip that arrow over. Now we just need to nudge it to the left so that it's centered within that shape. And there we go. So now we have our next and previous buttons. Now we just need our other navigation bullet points, basically. So we're going to do that using the ellipse tool. So I'm going to create a new layer above the previous and next buttons or groups. And in that new layer, we're going to go back to the ellipse tool. I'm going to make sure we have that orange/coral color selected for the fill color. I've got nothing selected for the stroke. And then I'm going to click and drag out down here, holding on to shift until we have a circle that's 10 pixels wide by 10 pixels tall. V to switch to the move tool. And then I'm going to nudge it down or drag it down to the bottom left corner here. And then holding on to shift, I'm going to nudge it up once and to the right once so that it's 10 pixels from the left side and 10 pixels from the bottom. Then I'm going to make a few copies of this. Actually, we'll start by making one copy. Command J to make a new copy, and then shift right arrow twice to move it over 20 pixels. With this new copy, I'm going to change the background color. So one way we can do that is we can double click inside the thumbnail area for this new copy, and that will give us a color selector. In this color selector, I'm going to enter a value of D9, 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 a light gray color. Hit enter or click on OK, and that changes the color for that one. So the one with the orange background is the current slide, the slide that's currently showing, and we can click on one of these other items to take us to the appropriate slide. So let's make a copy of this gray layer. Make sure you have that layer selected. Command J to copy it, and then shift right arrow twice to nudge it over 20 pixels. Make one more copy, Command J or Control J on a PC, and then shift right arrow twice to nudge it over 20 pixels. And there, now we have our navigation icons here. So we can call this nav bullet 1, and then just rename all of these layers so that they make sense. So nav bullet 3 here, and then finally for the last one, nav bullet 4. Then if you want to, we can clean our layers up a little bit more by grouping those 4 layers together. And we'll just call it nav bullets. And there we go. So we can collapse the content slider. We are now done with it. And just to make sure that we have all the right layers in this content slider group, we can turn that group off and back on and see which items disappear and reappear. And it looks like we have everything grouped appropriately. So now that we're done with the content slider, let's save our file. Command Shift S or Control Shift S on a PC to save as, and I'm going to save it as flat design 08.psd. So with that saved, we'll move on to the next video. Thank you for watching.